Welcome to Lock It Down Sports. I'm your host, Locke Hoover. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter at Lock It Up Media. That's Lock It Up Media on Twitter. You can also check us out at E5280 Sports. That's E5280 Sports. And today on the show, there is so much to get into, so much college football. But I do want to talk about, it's been only one game, but is this coach already on thin ice? What I liked about the Tennessee UTC game, and if this team has now a clear path to the playoff. But first, I want to talk about, I guess, the game of the week, the most potentially exciting game going into last week, and that was UGA and Clemson. And it intrigued me to see where these teams were based on the fact that I knew Georgia obviously would be good coming in, Carson Beck, all the guys they got coming back. Clemson struggled offensively last year. Let's see what they had, what they did, able to do against a very good Georgia team. And that's exactly what you saw in that first quarter. I mean, a defensive battle. Couldn't move the ball a whole lot. Only one big play from Clemson. And it wasn't this 70-yard run. It was about a 25-yard gain, something along those lines. And that's it. That was the only thing that was, oh, wow, big play, boom. Okay, we got some momentum going. Here we go. Obviously, that didn't happen. So we move to the second quarter. Georgia's first drive. I felt like it was a grind out, long play drive, and it was that led to the field goal. And you're like, okay, it's gonna be that kind of game. A grinded out, low scoring battle, and it's like, okay, which team's going to come out on top with this? Then, with about 6:31 left, Clemson's driving, and they lose their last timeout. And I'm watching, I'm like, huh. I mean, sure they were trying to draw Georgia off sides, but they're on the 35-yard line. Georgia's not jumping on that, right? And I feel like that's a very wasted timeout for Clemson at that time, where they were in the ball game, what yard line they were on, and just how that game was going. Because at that point, the timeout to me was way more important. With a close game, it was only 13-0 Georgia. And it's like, okay, you might need that timeout later in that half when you've got, say, a 2-minute offense, you get the ball back in 2 minutes to try to drive to score a touchdown or field goal, to cut into the lead, cut into the deficit. Granted, they end up hitting a field goal. They end up getting the later in the half. But that at that time, that's a big timeout to let go. So you go into halftime, and my whole thought of this was it's like a feeling out process about for the first half, what each team's trying to do, what they're doing, how they want to attack, because no one could really figure each other out. They couldn't run the ball either. Both teams struggled to run the ball. Yeah, some of it might have been because ETN was out for Georgia. But you roll in the third quarter, that's when things happened. The start of the third quarter, Georgia hits a big play, 33-yard play. Then they follow it with another one to try to get into the end zone, and that was incomplete. They end up scoring a field goal, and that's what you saw. That's when you saw the changes to me. Georgia made that halftime adjustments, moved the ball easily, and scored a touchdown. Excuse me, it was a touchdown, not a field goal on their first drive out of half. They end up scoring a touchdown, and it's like, all right, what's Clemson going to do? How are they going to respond, right? Well, that was it. So Clemson's opening drive, it will make a few adjustments, and they answered with Georgia and hit a field goal. So Georgia's still up 13-3 with 6:34 left in the third. Okay, Clemson's still in it. It's still a ball game, right? Georgia's second possession in the third. Drove right down the field and scored a touchdown. Now you're like, oh, okay. What does Clemson do? They did nothing. And right then and there, before we even got to the fourth quarter, or even late into the third quarter, I put down and I said, oh, this looks like this game is over. The third quarter, based on Clemson's offense and the two drives and adjustments Georgia made in that third quarter, I was like, this game might be a wrap. And I don't even have to tell you how the fourth quarter turned out. It became a blowout, and Georgia rolled. So my thoughts on this, my big thoughts is Clemson's offense still this bad as it was last year, being inept and unable to move the football? Or is Georgia's defense just this tough again? I think it's a combination of both. I mean, Clemson only had 188 total yards, 142 passing, 46 on the ground. Under 200 yards. I don't have to tell you how bad that is. I think Clemson's offense is going to struggle this year, like last year. And I don't think Georgia's defense is going to be this dominant all year long as they play better offenses. So it's something in the middle. And it's only one game, but it's a big one game. Kind of. And here's why I say kind of a big game. I say it's a big game because it can have some underlying elements to it as the season goes on. Now, why I said kind of is in this context, big picture, with a 12-team playoff, this game didn't mean anything. It didn't mean a daggum thing. I mean, if there's the 14 playoff, Clemson would be fighting for their lives every single week because they know 2 losses won't get them in, especially in the ACC. With the way Clemson looked, this could be a 3-loss team. Miami looked sharp, which we'll get into later. Maybe with their inept offense, they get upset by a Syracuse. Maybe Boston College looks better with now, granted they beat Florida State, which we've seen Florida State these last 2 weeks. Maybe Clemson loses to Florida State. Yes, Florida State's 0-2. They've looked rough. Still very talented. They've got a lot of talent on that team. Regardless, with a 3-loss Clemson team, they could still be the number 4 seed and get a automatic bye in the first round of the playoffs. Why? Because they're conference champs. And no wide world of sports should a 9-3 team have an automatic bye. They shouldn't even make the playoffs. But there will be 9-3 teams make the playoffs this year. No way in the world they should have that. And I say they could be a 3-loss team. Maybe with the way the ACC's looked, I touched on with Florida State being 0-2, losing to Georgia Tech and Boston College already, and the way Miami's looked. Heck, it might not be Clemson. Might be Florida. I mean, it might be Miami, which we'll get into a little bit later. But that's where we sit right now with this 12-team playoff and with this Clemson ball club. We're going to see what happened with them. And I know there's Dabo Swinney rumblings and frustrations, and I understand him not wanting to use the portal. I heard a stat the other week that it's Navy, Air Force, and Army and Clemson all not using the portal. The only teams that did not use the portal, obviously understandable, these service academies. Clemson, stubbornness. We'll see what happens. I don't think Dabo's going anywhere immediately, but after last season, we'll see what happens this season. There could be some upset boosters in that Clemson area there that might want to see a change in that head coaching position soon. Now, something I really did like about this Tennessee UTC game. Yes, it's a blowout. You can't take much from it, but you can take a few things. To me, and I saw, granted, I watched some of this game. I was mainly watching the Georgia Clemson game, but you can, from the Tennessee UTC game, you see enough to know Nico, dude is sharp. Cannon of an arm and accurate. 22 of 28, 314 yards, 3 TDs. Only played the first 2 quarters. Sharp, crisp throws, even though it was UTC. Yeah, that's the only thing. One of the biggest things I liked from this and what I liked seeing them do is what Tennessee and Josh Heupel did coming out of the 2-minute warning or the 2-minute timeout, since we're not allowed to say 2-minute warning, right? They started throwing the ball like it was a close game to work on things, try to simulate something important for later in the season or even, heck, next week against NC State. He didn't look crisp. He didn't look sharp against UTC. Once again, it's UTC. And yes, I know he's been practicing on it all year in the off season against better talent against the Tennessee defense, obviously. But it's different, The live action, even against a lesser opponent, a real game, it's something that was a good run through to face a real opponent in live game action to get that going. I mean, clearly the season starts Saturday, obviously, against NC State. But to me, this was a good warm-up, an important game for Nico playing with the offense. He's going to be part of all year. Knowing when to gel with them and actually getting a feel for the offense in live game action. Yes, I know. Played a little bit last year in mop-up duty. That's a little bit different. And then he started the bowl game last year, which is also different. Yeah, I know some guys sat out and he got a little bit of a preview-ish, I would say, of what his offense will be this year. But It's totally different now than last year for sure, obviously. And really, that's really important. I think this game was important for Nico and what he did and what he's going to bring to the table. Now, NC State squeaked by FCS school. They won. You know what? You chalk it up as okay. Talented offense. The best team, obviously, NC State and Tennessee played this year. So we got that. Charlotte, 7:30 ABC on Saturday. It'll be a battle. And it'll kind of show these teams a better feel of where they're at as they go into conference play. As Tennessee will have Oklahoma the following week after NC State. So, good measuring stick of where you're at. Now, talking about where you're at, we saw that potentially in Notre Dame and Clemson. Notre Dame, Texas A&M. And watching that game, A&M's quarterback looked rough. Really bad in the first half. And it's like, okay, feeling things out. Big opponent, playing Notre Dame. Granted, it's at home at the 12th man. But overall, by the end of the game, not good at all. He did not look good. He ended up being 12 of 30 for 100 yards and 2 picks. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that ain't good. And as a whole, the offense to me, A&M's offense didn't look good. Notre Dame to me didn't look great either. But they were to get the job done. That's what matters, and that's important to them. And I feel like they almost had to. And a big win for them that sets up their season. And when you look at their schedule, that might be their toughest game. A&M. Texas A&M might be, that's out of the way. They might be done now. As far as tough games, especially the way Florida State has looked. Yeah. Talent still on the roster, absolutely. But boy, oh boy, how bad have they looked. I know it's crazy after one game be talking about the playoffs, but it's a real possibility them Notre Dame's got a pretty manageable, easier schedule to get in and be the 5 seed because that's the highest they can be since they're not a conference champ. Yes, I know. A lot of football left. I understand that. But a very clear path and a viable contender now after getting over what I think could be a solid Texas A&M team. Ooh, excuse me. But yeah, that's a big win for them. And speaking of big wins, how about Miami, huh? Wowzer. Not something I expected at all. Yeah, can Miami win? Yeah, sure. I thought it was kind of a toss-up game, seeing what happens. Veteran quarterback coming back for Florida. Really good completion percentage. Miami beat the brakes off of Florida. 41-17. The U, not even close. Not even done. Over. You're like, oh my goodness. To me, they looked like the most impressive ACC team last week. Without a doubt. Play solid school in Florida and kill them. Yes, I know. They're a different opponent compared to Georgia. I understand that Clemson squared off at. I do. But the offense looked good. They can move the ball with Cam Ward. He lit Florida up all over the place. Florida Clemson could be the game that determines the ACC. And that offense can move the football. They did against Florida anyway. So Miami's kind of entering in the conversation here of they might be a team who gets in and becomes the ACC representative, because based on what we saw, I don't think we're getting more than one ACC school in. They can get two. I don't know if they're getting in two. They're getting in two teams. But obviously it's still early. Wait and see, obviously. But that is something. Now, when it comes to Florida, I think Billy Napier's on thin ice. I do. He has not looked good at Florida in his 2 years at all. And funny enough, what Florida does, they don't mess around with coaches. You win or you get canned. So Dan Mullen in 4 years at Florida, 34-15, 3 New Year's Day bowls, 2 wins in his 3 New Year's Day bowls. Napier right now, starting his 3rd season, is 11-15. 11-15 starting his 3rd season. This might be it for Napier. And the Florida fans I know were fine to get him out of there. They'll be like, finally, get Billy Napier out. And interesting enough, too, talking to Florida fans, they like Billy Napier, the Billy Napier hire over Brian Kelly. I was like, I was kind of surprised by that, but they like the Napier hire over Brian Kelly. So, it's a wait and see, but I think Napier, I don't think even 6-6 is good enough for Florida. I mean, it's most programs, it's not like the Heritage program like Florida is, all the national championships with Urban and Steve Spurrier. 7-5, 8-4 might save his job. But I think it'll depend on some of the losses, how bad they are. Hopefully Tennessee can take a share of Florida. They're probably going to get blown out by Georgia. They've already got hammered by Miami. What do they do against Florida State? Napier might be gone before Florida State game even happens, depending on how the season transpires. But I think he's got a lot of work to do to stay in Miami. I mean, in Gainesville. What a game last night, too, by the way, as the NFL season has started between with the Kansas City and the Ravens. Back and forth game, fun game. And, we missed a tie by a toe. And it's amazing, the NFL and their week 1 games, and just, it really is the NFL. That's why it is the most popular, most watched sport, TV ratings, everything. They can't do anything wrong. Whatever they do wrong, it doesn't matter. People still watch, the ratings follow. And wow, what a performance, what a show we got to open up the NFL season. It's fun. Finally, football's back. And we're going to get to enjoy this until February. And that's the best thing. We get to enjoy this until February. And I'm looking forward to another fun week, starting Saturday with college football and then into the NFL of week 1 completed. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Lock It Up Media. Lock It Up Media on X. You listen to Lock It Down Sports. I'm Locke Hoover. Talk to you next week.